Sparta was an ancient city-state known for its military discipline and unique political system. While it is often remembered for its legendary warriors, whose fame has taken on mythical proportions, the real story behind Sparta is full of surprises and unbelievable facts that many people have never heard. That's why we've put together 50 incredible facts about Sparta that you probably didn't know. We are familiar with most of Spartan history thanks to neighboring city-states, who either fought or otherwise interacted with Sparta, because Spartans did not write their own history. Sparta was one of the most powerful city-states in ancient Greece, located in the region known as Laconia or Lacedaemonia in the southeastern Peloponnese. It was founded around 900 BCE. Spartans are often depicted as men whose entire adult lives were consumed by brutal training, to the point where it was said war was a relief, since it meant they didn't have to train anymore. Between 413 and 386 BCE, regular Spartans weren't deployed on long imperial campaigns. Instead, Sparta relied on allies, mercenaries, and freed helots, former slaves, commanded by a handful of Spartan officers. All Spartan male citizens had to live a public life. At the age of 7, they began state-run education, and in adulthood, they joined a common mess halls of around 15 men where they dined every evening for life. Their military duty lasted until the age of 60. Spartan sexual customs were shaped to serve the state. There were no brothels, and self-gratification was discouraged. When an older man could no longer father children, he would often allow a favored student to sleep with his younger wife. As in most Greek states of the time, pederasty was practiced in Sparta. Philosopher Xenophon wrote that the relationship was acceptable if based on friendship and love, not merely physical attraction. However, Plutarch noted that once Spartan boys reached puberty, they became available for sexual relationships with older men. Spartan men were legally required to marry, likely by the age of 30. If they didn't, they could be fined and publicly humiliated. For women, not marrying wasn't illegal, but it was socially disgraceful, implying they were unable to find a husband or bear children. A man who didn't want to marry but still wanted to give Sparta more citizens could ask a married man to lend him his wife for reproductive purposes. This was seen as honorable, as the children would belong to the biological father's family group, yet not inherit his property. One of the most bizarre customs of Spartan marriage was the ritual bride abduction. After an arranged marriage, the groom would kidnap his bride, who was informed in advance. She'd shave her head, dress in men's clothing, and lie in a dark room, where the groom would come and, let's just say, consummate the marriage. This ritual was believed to help Spartan men, who had lived exclusively among males, adjust to female intimacy. Spartan men could legally take advantage of female helot slaves, and their illegitimate sons became a recognized class in Sparta. Although these offspring had certain privileges, they could never become full citizens. Spartan men were allowed to have only one legal wife at a time. If they wanted another, they had to divorce the first. No permission from the wife required. In Sparta, and whole Lacedaemonia as well, there were three main social groups: Spartans, full citizens with political rights; perioikoi, free men with no political rights. They often lived outside the city, and were farmers, craftsmen, and traders. Helots, the conquered native population, bound to the land, who worked as serfs on Spartan estates. They were not chattel slaves and could form families and live in settlements. Spartans could lose their legal status if they failed to contribute food to their mess hall. A man who fathered 3 sons and thus gave the state 3 new citizens was permanently exempted from military service. Despite their reputation, the Spartan hoplite infantry was actually 50 to 70% composed of perioikoi, so the army should more accurately be called Laconian rather than strictly Spartan. Perioikoi had limited training during peacetime, and their effectiveness relied heavily on basic marching drills. The command structure of the army had 4 officer levels, all under the king. Each officer commanded a specific unit, ranging from the largest to the smallest, which included 30 men, a very efficient system for relaying orders quickly and consistently. Unlike other Greek cities that used gold or silver coins, Sparta used iron bars called obuls as currency. These were large, heavy, and impractical, which discouraged theft. They had little value outside Sparta, discouraged hoarding wealth due to their size, and discouraged trade with outsiders, keeping Sparta isolated and self-sufficient. At the Battle of Thermopylae, it wasn't just 300 Spartans who faced the Persians. In reality, the Greek ground force led by King Leonidas I included over 7,000 men, among them 3,800 Peloponnesians, 700 Thespians, 1,000 Phocians, 400 Thebans, and 300 Spartan hoplites, each accompanied by 3 helots. While the Spartans fought bravely at Thermopylae, their legendary heroism wasn't always repeated. In 425 BCE, about 120 Spartans surrendered on Sphacteria Island. In 390 BCE, a Laconian division fled the field rather than face an Athenian force. In 371 BCE, 4 entire divisions retreated after being defeated by Thebes at Leuctra. Bravery was the greatest virtue for Spartans, and Spartan mothers would give their sons or husbands a shield as they left for war, saying, "Come back with it," or "on it." This meant they were expected to return as victors or die in battle. Returning without a shield meant desertion, as the heavy hoplite shield was the first thing a fleeing soldier would drop. The term ripsaspia, meaning throwing away the shield, became synonymous with cowardice. Interestingly, no fallen Spartan soldier was ever returned to Sparta at the height of its power. The dead were buried in mass graves on the battlefield, or in friendly territory nearby. This challenges the idea of bringing home warriors on their shields. Only soldiers who died in victorious battle and women who died in childbirth or in service to the gods received marked gravestones. These stones served more as memorials than grave markers. The most important weapon of a Spartan warrior was the round shield, called a hoplon, made of wood and leather, with bronze around the edges, or fully covering it later on. Losing one's shield was the greatest disgrace a Spartan could suffer. Spartans fought in tight rectangular formations called phalanxes. Hoplites stood shoulder to shoulder, linking shields, and the front few rows extended their spears through the shield wall. This created a deadly wall of spears that was extremely difficult to penetrate. The typical spear was about 2 meters long. If a soldier could afford it, He wore a bell-shaped bronze cuirass, often highly decorated, especially for kings. Their shields bore not only the Greek letter lambda, but also mythological or battle scenes. Common armor was made from layered linen or leather, reinforced with bronze plates on shoulder pads. Spartans grew long hair and beards, considered ancient symbols of free men. They took great care of their hair, and other Greeks wore long hair to show admiration for Sparta. Sparta was the only state in Greece with a mandatory public education system for boys, and literacy was the norm for citizens. In the first phase of training, called paids, boys of the age of 7 to 12 years learned to read and write, but the focus was on endurance, athletics, survival skills, and outsmarting others. They went barefoot and mostly naked to toughen their bodies. Their food was strictly limited, so they had to steal to survive. Theft was considered a valuable skill, and boys who stole successfully were not punished, even if caught later. Only those caught in the act were punished, for being careless, not for stealing itself. The second phase, called paidiskoi for boys aged 12 to 14, focused on social development. Boys were expected to choose an older male mentor, usually a free young man, who acted as a protector and surrogate father. These bonds helped forge unity among future warriors and often involved sexual relationships. During this stage, boys received their first cloak and clothing. Around the age of 20, they entered the final phase, hebontes. They were expected to join a mess hall, syssitia, and contribute food. Failure to do so meant losing citizenship. Each mess group decided whom to accept, and the state had no say. Men who dined together fought together in battle. The most intelligent youths, typically aged 21 to 30, could join the elite Cryptia, a secret institution that trained future leaders. As an initiation rite, they were sent into the countryside with daggers and ordered to kill any helot they encountered, especially the strongest ones, and take their food to survive. Killing a helot was a step toward becoming a true Spartan. Each autumn, Sparta declared war on the helots, so they could kill them without legal or religious consequences. The strongest were eliminated, the rest terrorized, preventing uprisings. Spartans forced helots to drink undiluted wine, which they considered dangerous. The drunken helots were paraded in public as warnings to children, showing what intoxication looked like. They were also forced to sing and dance for the Spartans' amusement. Spartans were trained to speak briefly and powerfully. Youths were taught to compress meaning into as few words as possible. The term laconic comes from Laconia, the region around Sparta. The most famous example of laconic speech is when Philip II of Macedon sent a warning. "If I enter Laconia, I will level Sparta to the ground." The Spartans replied with just one word: "If." Historian Xenophon wrote that Spartans rarely spoke unless spoken to. On long marches, they would stare ahead silently, their voices quieter than statues. Even Julius Caesar recognized this power of brevity when he summed up a battle. "Veni, vidi, vici. I came, I saw, I conquered." While it's widely believed that Spartans threw weak or deformed infants off a cliff on Mount Taygetus, that's not quite accurate. Newborns were inspected by a special committee and bathed in wine to test their strength. If found unfit, the baby was left in the forest. A second chance to survive. In rare cases, helots adopted and raised them. Spartans wore simple clothing, ate and drank basic meals in mess halls, but they still enjoyed wealth in other ways. such as owning and training horses for chariot races. The first female Olympic champion came from Sparta. Her name was Kiniska. Although women were banned from participating in the Olympic Games and not allowed to compete in any athletic events, there was one loophole. They could enter as horse or chariot owners, since in equestrian events, victory was awarded to the owner, not the jockey, who was usually anonymous. Kiniska was the daughter of Spartan king Archidamus II, and it was her brother, Agesilaus II, who provoked her to compete, wanting to discredit the discipline, which relied on wealth rather than physical skill. Kiniska was the first woman to breed and own her own horses, and she won the 4-horse chariot race at the Olympics. Her victory inspired other Spartan women to begin breeding horses and entering them in the games. While Spartan girls didn't enter the agoge training system like boys, they were still expected to be physically fit and mentally strong. They were educated alongside boys, a practice unique in ancient Greece. They learned to read, write, and count, but also music, dance, and athletics. Physical strength was highly valued, as Spartans believed that strong women would give birth to strong children. Spartan girls participated in sports like wrestling, running, discus, and javelin. Thanks to this, Spartan women were famous across Greece for their strength, beauty, and grace. Spartan women could own property, and Aristotle claimed they owned nearly 2/5 of Spartan land. They played a significant societal role, greater than women in any other Greek city-state. Spartans believed that more freedom for women meant healthier children and a stronger state. But the status of Spartan women still depended on their roles in the family and society, not on personal freedom. Even Kiniska's success ultimately served her brother's agenda to discredit elite sports. Spartan agriculture was based on barley, wine, cheese, grains, and figs. Spartan cuisine was famously austere, a deliberate choice reflecting discipline and moderation, not poverty. This simplicity contrasted sharply with the lavish feasts of other Greek cultures. The most infamous dish was black soup, a mixture of pork, blood, vinegar, and salt. To non-Spartans, it was so revolting that people joked Spartans preferred dying in battle to eating it again. But what Spartan cuisine lacked, their music more than made up for. Sparta was known for its unique musical culture, and poets and musicians traveled there for inspiration. Music competitions in Sparta often led to new innovations. Notable musicians included Terpander, Alcman, and Tyrtaeus. Spartans guarded their musical heritage so fiercely that they forbade helots from performing works by Alcman and Terpander, forcing them instead to sing folk songs. Music was also used to boost morale and unity, and Spartans would march into battle to music. Sparta was ruled by 2 hereditary kings from the Agiad and Eurypontid dynasties. This dual kingship, or diarchy, was a unique feature of Spartan governance. Kings had religious, judicial, and military authority. When one king went to war, the other stayed behind to handle politics and protect the city. Spartans celebrated the festival of Carneia, honoring Apollo. No military conflict was allowed during this time. When the Persians invaded Greece, the festival prevented Sparta from deploying its full army. To avoid seeming cowardly, they sent King Leonidas I and his personal guard to hold the line until the rest of the army could follow. Had Leonidas returned victorious, he would have faced legal consequences for violating the sacred truce. Helen of Troy, the most beautiful woman in the world, was actually Helen of Sparta. She was born in Sparta, her stepfather was King Tyndareus, and she married King Menelaus, who later led the Spartan contingent of the Greek army at Troy, alongside his brother Agamemnon. After Sparta's defeat at the Battle of Leuctra in 371 BCE, it never regained its former power. Though Macedon, the Achaean League, and Rome overshadowed Sparta militarily, Spartan culture lived on, thanks largely to the Romans, who mythologized Spartan ideals. Spartans welcomed this cultural tourism, sharing embellished or invented stories of their glorious past. Laconophilia is the love or admiration of Sparta, its culture or constitution. Even in rival Athens, many admired Sparta's state structure as a realized political ideal. Today, ancient Sparta is an archaeological site, and the modern city of Sparta, founded in the 1830s, lies nearby. And to conclude, we have an authentic Spartan joke for you. Do you know why Spartan women are the only women in the world who can rule over men? Because they are the only women who are mothers of men. That's all 50 facts about Sparta. Which one surprised you? Which did you already know? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching.